Okay, many of you have heard about Operation High Jump that was involving Admiral Byrd and over 4,000 troops and all kinds of ships in an effort to go down to Antarctica after World War II. And there's been a lot of things said about it. And I've done some research on it over the years and flip-flop a few ideas. I've had a few people on one of my other videos where I did make a comment about it, and I said down in the video, if you really want me to, let me know. And I've had a few comments on it now, and I thought that I would, especially because I also found another video about it, and it's a little more revealing about the reality of it. But then also he sent me a clip, or one of the guys here sent me a clip, and it's about this video game, Worlds of War, and how they're recreating a battle that you end up doing where you go down there with a fleet and the whole 9 yards like you're supposed to, just like they did, and you end up fighting these aliens, which aren't aliens. They're actually Nazis that lived on forever in a secret base that's somehow hidden in mountains and stuff in an area of Antarctica. Now, a lot has been said about this, and whenever you see the video about Admiral Byrd, it kind of looks conspicuous. And he also says something conspicuous whenever he talks about, if you go on there past that, there's another land after it, and everything. But I feel he's trying to be ambiguous, like people in the service are. My dad was one of them, and he was high up in intelligence and stuff, and there's a way that they talk, especially whenever you get into certain subjects. And with my dad, you quickly realized at the point that, and the conversation was over then, right there, wasn't it? He's told me on more than one occasion that if I knew, I couldn't tell you. And that was pretty telling, seeing all the things that he actually did tell me. Which just leaves me with more questions than answers in some cases. And I really desperately want to believe in aliens. A lot of people do. Nowadays, with the new sightings they've come out with, it's got a new vigor going on with it, and that's kind of what spurred all of this. But the reality that I found of the situation might be a little bit different, but we can involve the alien thing, but that might be something different, and it might involve something else that my father spoke on a couple of times. Let me see. The best way would be to go back at the first of this. The Americans and a couple of other nations had already established a base, or a little post, which was not much more than a shack out in the middle of nowhere down here, checking out penguins and seeing what the deal was with it. And it was something that was very much an investigative site that was like whenever they go to Greenland and they look at the ice cores and things like that, or the glaciers and all of that idea. And they were trying to get data out of this idea and down here. And at this time, we had already gone to the North Pole, and Admiral Byrd, and others. But this seemed to be, an untouched area. And I know about the Piri Reis map and how it shows you the way that it looked long, long ago. And if you want to go with a concept that works with that one, then what we have to do is let the Earth keep melting like we're doing right now, which already happened before. These sea levels were higher than they are now in ancient times and before anybody was doing anything or cow farts. For it'll melt down some more. And Iceland doesn't totally get melted away and so on. Everything doesn't go away totally, and it doesn't flood the world over, by the way. But in doing so, it'll melt more of this behind, and then you might find that somebody had been there previously. There might have been some form of occupation. There's a valley, and people talk about this, they say all kinds of things. There's a valley up here where it has runoff, and that runoff is going down and through into the ocean. And they've tried to play that off as some kind of sacred Shangri-La valley that is warm and all of these things. And while I'll bet it is warmer than you would think that it is before you get on that continent, it's not anything that's real habitable. Eskimos wouldn't want to hang around, really. But the idea here is that you could build a secret base. And that these New Schwaben people had come along and built a base, and an underground base that submarines could get into, like something you used to maybe see out of old Johnny Quest. Or you may have seen in The Incredibles how they pass through and underwater and go to something, and they've got this fake mountain. It's much like the Disney mountain that they have the roller coaster in, but secretly inside all of that is a base, right? And then, of course, snow goes on it and everything, too, so it just looks natural. I can't find enough connectives, really, to tell you that that happened, and the idea of pulling these UFOs into it seems even odder. That almost should be set on a shelf by itself. But because of what's been told about this, it seems to be right there and has to be part of it. Because the concept is we got down there with this Operation High Jump, and in a short amount of time we got our butt kicked and then came back. As if it wasn't supposed to be somewhat of a short mission anyhow. And it ran shorter than it was supposed to be for reasons that weren't disclosed so much. And again, Admiral Byrd gets ambiguous, but he also didn't want to turn around and say, well, that's a great place to build a base to attack us from, and things like that. But the concept was we already knew that from North America to Russia and so on would be just ride over. But people could also, sneaky go under. Well, the idea I was told by somebody who I believe had a little more sanity in the situation than some of these people that are trying to say different things, told me, and I hit on it, and then the guy told me, so it kind of worked together. But let's set the spaceships aside for a second, and the concept really becomes the fact that some of these German people left at World War II. Towards the end of it, saved their ass towards this new place that they had built. In fact, there's this statements where he built a Shangri-La for him and stuff with their submarine fleet. And that correlates with the idea of them making it to Argentina that was found out about. And may even Hitler still be alive, but I don't want to even go with that thing. Well, he's long passed away now, no matter what. But, or he was taken up in a spaceship and they cut off his head and keep him alive in a jar. Let's go back to sanity for a second. But it's possible that what this was a depot place where they had already preemptively put a whole lot of supplies in so that the fleet of submarines could help utilize it, but then also at the very end of this, they could make it through that. Now, I don't know whether to believe it or not, but in one of these guys' videos, it shows you that they had their base there and it had been attacked and pretty much blown to smithereens. And then it's been overgrown by snow, and somebody said that in 2013 they found it and that there was only about half as many people that were there and they had died of mysterious causes and just left it at that. Have you heard that one? A lot of people have made a bunch of assumptions. That makes me think that maybe the Americans attacked this place and then after they realized there was really nothing, they left. A whole bunch of things can come out of that idea. And then of course we don't find it, but they finally find the remnants, which are under snow supposedly, Or were they transporting these guys? Did they find some people there? It's really a question I don't know if we'll ever truly answer unless somehow they find this X base and it really gets archaeologically looked at. But it seems to be one of those things that's a little bit covered up, or there's nothing there. You see, I've researched long enough to kind of smell things whenever it's there and sometimes whenever it's not. And I've been thrown off track many times. So I've grown used to the smell of the fake. And there are things that people put together and it becomes extremely enticing. I've been accused of things like that in my videos, but I'm trying to show something that I've accumulated over a large amount of time, and it's something that's not just a whim and somebody saying something off the cuff. Hopefully if you watch my videos you've made enough connections. Back to the issue at hand. So we have this idea that they had built this base there just like we had built our bases and so on. And so there's the thought that this whole thing is a cover-up on the fact that we built a base. Oh, I've heard that one too. And that the whole thing is pointing fingers at somebody else easily allows something else to happen. And people said that we were the ones that were doing the archaeology and the things, and that's what it was all about. Others say that the whole reason that they did that was that they had been duped into the idea that there was something going on, and so they were making a fake run like if they were to run at Siberia, but instead of doing war games in Siberia or Alaska someplace, they went to do it down there. But they lost a couple of planes. I mean, the weather's harsh here, and sometimes it's calm to people, but you get up over that mountain and the wind's whipping and it really can get tough. A lot of these old planes they would have had during that time, and they had helicopters and things along that line. There's a story and maybe a picture here. Let me zoom out of this and talk about a few other things along with this idea. There's a picture you might even show here. There's places that show you where what they did was they built a base down there and that they could even land planes, and so they sent people up and they set some base up down there. Only problem with that is that if you look at this picture closely, that's a model, superimposed on it. In fact, half the pictures that you see like this are that way, and the other half look real. And it seems like what they're trying to do is get you to believe something. But take that fake plane out of there, and the reality is, there is a runway that could have landed this plane and the others that they had there. So that gets to be a little bit more idea on perhaps what had happened and so on. And people are telling you that there's a hole in the end of the world, and there's a Gartha, and that there's an inside world. And man, I grew up under the age of Journey to the Center of the Earth, and believe me, that's a whole lot of the reason I was doing Dungeons and Dragons and things in the first place, is that whole sense of wonder. And that, you know, in reality, a real little dungeon is real small. In fact, the word concept comes from a hole or an obulette, where you just dump people down in a pit, and they're lucky if they get fed, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't. Of course, now, you could go down in that pit, and if he was lucky to have had something on him they didn't take from him, you might find something. Well, that's a far cry from the Dungeons and Dragons idea of going down corridor after corridor and finding things in a chest of goods or something magical, or an old skeleton with a cool set of armor that you can take. Or you might have to fight him. Anyhow, so there's depictions that people look at that are like this idea that's here. So we're still stuck on this alien idea, or this UFOs, but now they're not aliens, are they? We've got to have some foe here, don't we? These people, ever since World War II, have been picked on repeatedly. In fact, even in our modern times and things like Indiana Jones, it really gets overdone. But you have to have some foe here. And seeing how Spielberg has a history, it kind of works with that well. But also, some of those movies are quite telling, if you know. I've made videos that show you some of the things about it. It's like that in Conan the Barbarian and so on, where there are things in that have a reference to something we find is real. But this spaceship idea, a lot of those pictures, again, are superimposed. There's a couple of them that I have a visual of that I don't have in front of me, or for y'all, that you can tell easily. And in fact, if you look into them, you'll find that one craft has been extracted out and superimposed on 3 or 4 backgrounds, one of which is kind of plastering it over a plane. But then, and you can even see the rough edges around it, and it looks terrible. But then there's a couple of shots that actually look pretty darn good, don't they? Yeah. So I've really wanted to believe in this. And so here's a theory that people don't talk about when they talk about this, really, is this idea that they had built this underground base. Somebody drew a picture of it here. That's pretty cool. To where they could have made some kind of astrodome, and then the top of it has ice on it still, and they faked the top of it out to where it's jagged and stuff, and snow got on it, and and they can sink in and then come up under the underground base and have that going on. But there's not much area right there. Well, you can dig and go up other places and make other connectives too, but there's another idea where you take those spaceships and you say, well, they had them and they took them to here, right? But when we did that Operation High Jump, the reason that we quit so quick is that we found them and the Nazis We blew up their little base. Everybody sworn to secrecy off of it. We took those spaceships, and that's what they talk about being at Area 51. Bob Lazar and the ones that he saw and so on. The only thing that makes that not correlate is they either sandblasted off the Nazi symbols on them and made some other forms of them than what these things all look like, or there's not really a connective to it. So, again, that theory falls flat. I mean, I would like to believe in aliens, and I believe there definitely is aliens out there somewhere. Whether they've been here ever is another question. Whether they're zipping around all the time is another. But of course, we've seen a few videos recently that are really in question. In fact, the government put out one. They're like, don't know what this is. There's actually been a lot of don't know what this is. And so people come up with ideas like that, where that's where it happened and that's where this thing is. In fact, it's still going on today. But you would run into these people a whole lot more. There would be something to have happened to the point. See, some of these pictures, oh, they look pretty good. What really sells this one is they put the lens flare on it going across the craft and everything. So what they did was they just superimposed the alien craft here on it. And then they did the smoky effect to it. They took most all the color out of it. Then they put the lens flare onto it. Did a couple of smudge effects where it gives a slight blur, and there we go. I'd like to believe, but if this was going on and they had something like this long ago, we'd know about it because we'd all be speaking German. Oh, there's this special pact with them and this, that, and the other and stuff. No, not really. In fact, when you look at the real pictures of what they went through and the icebreaker and having to go all the way through, this is a hell of a mission. And supposedly this was like an Arctic training type mission situation, where they went in and maybe they did make a base. But they didn't want to lose any people. And supposedly a plane went down. I don't know if there's a picture of that. Here's Operation High Jump, and when they are at the pole here. Strangely, they tell you there's Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Chichijima. I've got a video about Chichijima and the incident there. You gotta check it out. There was this brave kid that was there named George. It's a great story. So people have made a lot out of this, and I can't find enough connectives to tell you that it really happened. The way that people want to turn and twist it into, that there's something extra. Perhaps I haven't looked enough, but I've watched enough video about stupid. Now, here's a plane that did land at that time. Operation High Jump, 1946, boom, boom, boom. Landing in that place that we're talking about. So, did they set up something? We had some subs hooked up with that too. We could have checked all that out. We'd know all about it. People look at pictures like this and they try to believe this isn't photoshopped. But that's that drain. It's up in Michigan at some place or whatever that drains in, and the dam. And they've just superimposed it and put it on a picture of Earth. That's not what's going on, and the Earth is not flat. And people try to tell you that Admiral Byrd, what he really did was he went to the edge of the Earth and he met Jesus, and Jesus told them all, get the hell out of here. So here's real pictures from there, and they had a helicopter and so on, and this is whenever it's taking off. And they're getting a look at things and setting up where they went. Ah, here we go. And here's where it is. So there are stations that we've set up here now, here, here. But over here, you'll see New Schwabenland. Right? New Schwabenland. So this was the area they had set up. Right there. And I like a lot of Robert Sepper's work. I really do. But he puts a little too much emphasis on some things, like inner earth. Like people that have been living in caves forever and they turned into grays in situations like that, and the moon-eyed people, and where you can go with that concept versus what kind of makes up mythologies and people change things, and how many facts are true out of it. Sure, the possibility is still there. The possibility of the whole thing is entirely still there. But this concept of them having these incredible spaceships and doing this thing doesn't really seem to have as much levity or gravity to it as the reality of it. Here's Bird after they made the track, and they all signed the picture. This is actually just one group of them, one squad that went one area when other people were going others. That's made people say all kinds of things. They call this Evelyn Group. That's with Richard Byrd in it, but other groups did other things. So what I found out is that they had taken whaling ships, and that they had been whaling down there, but not really set up anything ever. And so those guys were kind of smart, and they were setting up for World War II. And you can look into this, and they really were setting up for World War II. And one of the things they did is try to get a lot of things that they needed, or what they knew that the routes would be cut off of because of the attrition and who they got what from where. And try to get an abundance of what they could of it, and other routes, everything, and ideas like that going on. And one thing that they had that they needed a lot of for all their machinery that they still used at that time was whale oil. So these big whaling ships would go down there, and they were trying to pack up and do whaling and so on. And what they did was they sent, along with a submarine and a group of people, so it was kind of secretive in doing it because it was made to look like they were just setting up that radio station just like Americans were. But it involved military people and perhaps some archaeology people too. That's not really found out. I can't find that thread. But they helped set up the place that ends up being New Schwabenland with these people. And it ended up being a base for them there, but also it was a haven that if anybody was out whaling, they had a contact with. And perhaps something could happen out of it. But it really was based on whaling, and they built that secondary place in the mid to late 1930s. About 38 or 39, it was kicking and going. And they had a whaling industry that was not really built out of that harbor like you would think of as crab industry and having those harbors and so on. For it worked off big ships like this that really had the ability to do it all themselves. But it was a hub outlet of that. And that's really all it was. And something that they could utilize. and that they had gone back and forth a few times, and these whalers would bring them supplies and then come up close to the shoreline and then make contact and get back. But I can't find, other than that, anything happening striking like that. But you could imagine also you could have a bunch of German officers that were trying to get the hell out of there, get on these boats and go to that same place and make that same trek, and or have German U-boats do the same thing, and or whenever they get there, there's U-boats already there, and then they take them from there to Argentina and so on. Or maybe it's just on these ships right here. There's a lot of that connective whenever you find that those people ended up in Argentina and so on, and then spread out from there and weren't really just there because they were being found out about. A lot were caught and served for their war crimes, but what I can really find that this big draw and this treasure that they had found, for it had a nickname to it that equates to treasure, was maybe not a treasure like finding an archaeological treasure, for they did a lot of that. I kind of followed that trail. Kind of don't want to do a video about it though, because, well, hell, I'm already demarcated and everything and shadow banned, so why the hell not? But you know what the Nazis knew, what they were looking for, what they perhaps found, and did they find this technology? Because all the other technology that they had going on ended up coming over with their scientists, if y'all know about it. That led a lot to America's advances here towards the end. We were put two and two together now. It made our space program work out. People getting together on the nuclear bomb too. And so you'd think if there was something like this that came out of it, even if they tried to keep it hush-hush for so many years, that they couldn't keep it hush-hush for 70 or 80 years unless the technology no longer worked, or there was some other thing done with it after that turned into something totally different that's not that anymore. Because we see a lot of UFO shapes, but what we don't see anymore is anything that looks like this, or the ones that we were looking at before, right? So as much as I would like for it to be the case that they went down there and pulled off this great thing, it really looks like it didn't have that much to do with it. They lost one of these planes right here and some troops, from what I understand, and he didn't want to have any more loss off of it, but they had already accomplished what they were going to accomplish. Well, what does that mean? Did they find the UFOs and everything? Did they find the base? Well, here's like that supposed New Schwabenland-like base before it was obliterated out, but now it's just up under, supposedly, whether it crashed down off normal means or so on. And I don't know if this is a true verified fact. Let me know if you've figured out anything on it that I'm unaware of. Funny how it's got a pyramid shape in the background of it. But this has all been flattened down, and there were supposed to have been 26 people there possibly, but only like 15 at the time, but they only found like 7 bodies or something, so they only found like half the people. And then the stink is they had died mysteriously. You know what's weird about that? Whenever I first heard about this, I'm going over it was a long time ago. And movies quite often show you things, or sometimes they influence your thought too. And one of the things that came to my mind was the movie The Thing. You know, with Kurt Russell and everything, and that there was this something that they found. That correlates to another thing that I found not too long ago that showed that whenever they dig down and get these ice cores, sometimes they pull up bacteria forms that are latent, that are from long ago, that they don't have in the CDC and things like that, and that we could activate something by that method somehow. Something could get disturbed and kicked up. A meteor could hit and blow it back up again, cough something out that may be detrimental now. Maybe they ran into something like that and it took out most of them, everybody that was there. Maybe the U.S. figured out that there did have something going on and blew the shit out of it. Maybe if you go in there and you go into a special room, you can lift up a board in the floor and go down a staircase and into a secret area that leads off into this mountain over here, and there's submarines and all kinds of stuff. But I really highly doubt that. As much as I would like for us to be at the level of humanity that we would have cool things like that and underwater bases that you've seen in sci-fi stuff that we should probably have going on by now, as well as a big space station that's bigger than that, and a moon base, an RDB trying to colonize Mars perhaps. And we've really slowed down in my lifetime, or it seems from our ideas and even the projections whenever I was a kid, and they tell you by 2005 we're going to be, 2010, 2020, and it just keeps going, and just all stopped, a little bit here and there. It's funny how the budget is 3 times as big and it gets very little done comparative wise anymore. That's probably another topic in another video. Let me know what you think downstairs. There's I've found correspondence from people, like here's one where they had correspondence between people from there even, and so on, and then people show this idea and everything, boom, this is it. And I'm like, that doesn't give me the feeling of a base. Oh, well, it's not supposed to, see? No. Base 211, Antarctic Fortress, no. I can't find it. I can't find enough connections for me to make enough video about it to turn around and even give you a woo about it. I can make some videos about woo events with UFOs that actually have some type of validity to them, to where I feel like I could probably make a video with a precursor to the first of it, telling you, now I'm not going all in on this, but check this shit out. You hear stories and check this story out. But everybody wants this to be one, and I find that I don't think that it is one. There's some cool stories about it, but it doesn't really have that much flavor. In fact, one of the cool stories is they nabbed one of the penguins there and they put him up on the deck, and they kept the little penguin there hanging out. I forget what the name, and I think they named him and stuff, but there's a penguin on there. Task Force 68, Operation High Jump, Navy South Pole Expedition. That's what the idea was. But why did they have so much going on with it? Well, I guess they wanted to make sure and not to have any problems and have double backup and BS, due to the way that it worked for going to the North Pole. People probably say, well, we're not going to be screwing around here this time, are we? Here's these people are about to get naked. They just got towels on. They're about to get naked and jump in the water there and see if they can stop their heart. Frolicking around at the flagpole of the geographic South Pole in Antarctica. that more what went on there? You see, because there's this kind of picture, right? Ah ha ha. See, I don't know about this, and that's aha. Give you an idea here. There's people there looking in that hole, but there ain't nothing in that hole but water. Somebody has superimposed this on there, and those stalagmites, I can tell just by looking at it. In fact, if this is the truth of it, this stalagmite is probably the longest icicle ever in humanity. It would weigh tons. And if it was to let go, it would probably punch a hole through this UFO that's here. But look at the size of the UFO. It's not just the black shape. It goes all the way to here, all the way to there. Now, I don't know where you want to believe that rock comes to in this hill that's around this right here, but pretend this thing's a quarter and try to get it in that slot and put it where it is. I can show you this same concept with another picture, and it's like a Photoshop program idea, fakery that they're trying to pull off. And if there's something real to it, why keep trying to make fake things about it? If you have to Photoshop something, now if you're just trying to say it was like this, that's one thing. If you're trying to go, oh my God, what is this? That's another. Like, you know what they found? There's a giant geosphere, and it's the Robotons have come back and they're going to activate. Well, that hole is there, but that steel globe thing is not. And as much as I'd like to believe a lot of the things that are said about this and so many other things, I say that it's probably working a different way. In fact, you know, there were these early jets that were out there that if you look at that, back then you might think that's a UFO situation like that. And if they were fighting with those things coming out of nowhere, Horton HO-229, defenders of the Nazi Antarctic colony. See, some of these pictures, because of their antiquity and the way they look and everything looks uniform with them, it gives some type of validity to it. It looks like, well, there's something going on there. But there are Photoshop programs nowadays that can get you through this. And I just have a hard time with it. Seriously. You know, my dad told me about Foo Fighters and so on, because he was a flyboy. I've told you stories about that before. So, they didn't really, most of the time, have to do with something that seemed like a UFO or anything like that. You know, and Kilroy was here in that situation. Here's another picture, all these skis. There's some of these skis are actually in a museum. A dog sled. Yep, there are dogs out there too, and they did the whole thing like going to the North Pole, but they did it at the South Pole. There and back. And while they were doing it, some other people were doing some other things. Oh, they're digging the secret base. No, and it looks like everybody came back from it too, so they aren't really doing that either. It doesn't seem like you can get that idea, and while this idea here looks somewhat fanciful, I don't find that in the cards, guys. Let me know what you think downstairs. If it's amazing with these things, if you found a few pieces that really could make a true connection, boom, you could have it. Like I said, this Lazar and his stories, UFOs, what connects? Is there really any connection? And if you can't find enough to validate it, I don't feel like I can make a video about it. It's just extreme speculation. But I guess in a video full of speculation, I could say the different ones. Peace.